All right, so jumping right into it today, um, you might have seen this thing with Trump
Yeah,
and ABC News.
big headlines.
Yeah, it's not every day a former president, wins a lawsuit against a major news organization like that.
No, not at all, and especially a defamation case.
Especially defamation case, that's what I'm saying.
These are so hard to prove,
Yeah, they don't usually settle.
and especially involving a public figure like Trump.
Exactly. So that's why we're taking a deep dive into this whole thing today, because this case involved some pretty serious claims made by George Stephanopoulos, ABC's well-known anchor
Right, right.
about Trump. And there are some interesting legal questions here that I think could impact, the future of news and like what we all see and read.
Oh, absolutely. I think this goes way beyond just a typical, celebrity lawsuit. This really gets at some fundamental questions about free speech, media responsibility, and, how we hold powerful people accountable.
Okay, so for those who maybe haven't been following this too closely, can you give us the rundown? Like, what exactly was this case about?
Sure. So the lawsuit stemmed from statements that Stephanopoulos made during an interview back in March with Congresswoman Nancy Mace. And he said on air multiple times that a jury had found Trump liable for rape. And it turns out that that wording wasn't exactly accurate.
Yeah, okay, and that's where the defamation part comes in, right?
That's right. You see, the jury in the E. Jean Carroll civil case, they actually found Trump liable for sexual abuse, not rape. And while both are obviously serious offenses, legally speaking, there is a distinction between the two.
I see. So even though Stephanopoulos was talking about a real case, the specific language he used ended up being grounds for a defamation suit.
Exactly. And, in defamation cases, like every single word matters. And that's especially true when you're dealing with a public figure like Trump. The bar for proving defamation is incredibly high.
And even though it's high, ABC still chose to settle this, didn't they?
They did, and for a pretty substantial amount, too.
Yeah. I remember reading something like $15 million going to Trump's future presidential foundation and museum, another million for his legal fees. And then ABC News and Stephanopoulos both put out a public statement of regret, too.
It's a lot. Yeah, and that really makes you wonder, why would they back down like that, especially if they felt confident in their case?
That's what I'm thinking. I was reading that some legal experts actually thought ABC had a decent chance of winning this.
They did. There's this argument that Stephanopoulos was just using everyday language and that he didn't mean for his statements to be taken literally as defamation.
So, he wasn't trying to intentionally harm Trump's reputation.
Right, and that's a defense that can sometimes work in these kinds of cases. But even with a strong legal argument, there were clearly other factors at play here. I mean, think about it. Their reputation was on the line.
And Stephanopoulos, too, he's, known for being a pretty straight shooter.
Exactly. He's a respected journalist, so a very public trial, even if they ultimately won, could have tarnished their image and played into all the skepticism that already exists towards the media these days.
So even if they won the case, they could have lost in other ways?
That's the dilemma they were facing, and it's something that all news organizations have to think about now, especially in this environment where trust in the media is already kind of shaky.
It's funny you mention that because this isn't even the first time Trump has gone after a media company like this. Remember that lawsuit against CBS News?
Oh, right, the one with the Kamala Harris interview.
Yeah, that one's for $10 billion.
It's a big one, and it makes you wonder if this is going to be a new trend. Are we going to see more public figures using these kinds of lawsuits to kind of pressure the media?
It's a good question, and it makes you think about the implications for regular people like us, right?
Absolutely, because if news organizations start to become too afraid of these legal battles, it could impact the kind of reporting they're willing to do.
So it's not just about Trump and ABC, it's about the kind of information we all have access to.
Precisely. This case might seem like it's just about a politician and a news network, but the potential ripple effects could be felt by all of us, and that's what makes it so important to understand what happened here.
Okay, so let's dig into that a little more.
Mm-hmm.
What are the specific concerns here? How could this case potentially change the way news is reported?
Well, one of the biggest concerns is this idea of a chilling effect.
What's that?
Basically, it's the idea that journalists might start second-guessing themselves and avoid certain stories, even important ones, out of fear of getting sued.
Oh, I see. So they might shy away from reporting on powerful people or controversial topics, even if those are the stories that need to be told.
Exactly. And think about what that means for you. If journalists are hesitant to cover those kinds of stories, you're less likely to get the full picture. It limits your ability to stay informed and make good decisions, whether it's about voting your community or just understanding what's going on in the world.
So it's not just about journalists being cautious. It's about our access to information being limited.
That's a key takeaway here. And if this case encourages other public figures to file similar lawsuits, even if those lawsuits are shaky, it just adds to the problem. It makes sense. Even if those lawsuits don't go anywhere, they still take up a lot of time and resources, right?
Oh yeah, newsrooms are already stretched thin as it is.
Exactly. So defending themselves against all these legal challenges, it just distracts them from their main job, which is reporting the news.
It's like a drain on the whole system. And ultimately, it's the public that suffers.
Right. And it's not just about the practical challenges either. This case also plays into this bigger issue of declining trust in the media.
That's what I was thinking. This whole thing kind of feeds into that narrative that the media is biased or unreliable or just interested in sensationalism.
It does, and that's a problem for everyone, not just journalists. I mean, if we can't agree on a basic set of facts, how can we even have productive conversations about the issues facing our country?
It's like it undermines our ability to have a healthy democracy.
Exactly. A healthy democracy relies on citizens being able to access accurate information and, engage in constructive debate. When that foundation is eroded, it's much harder to address challenges and find common ground.
So you're saying this case could have implications for how we function as a society, not just how the media operates.
That's what's so concerning about this, and it raises some really important questions about the future of news and how we stay informed in this increasingly complex world.
Well, on that note, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll discuss some potential solutions and what we can all do to make sure we're getting accurate information and supporting good journalism. So stay with us.
Yeah, it's a challenging situation for sure, but I don't think it's all doom and gloom, you know?
Okay, good.
There are things we can do, I think, to counter these trends.
All right, let's talk solutions then.
Yeah.
What can we do to make sure we're getting accurate information and supporting good journalism?
Well, I think the first step is to just be more active and discerning consumers of news.
So not just taking everything at face value.
Right. We can't just passively accept everything we read or hear. We need to think critically. Question sources and be aware of our own biases.
So don't just rely on headlines or, what you see on social media.
Exactly. Do some digging, check multiple sources, try to get different perspectives on the same story.
And be wary of anything that sounds too good to be true or that fits a little too perfectly with what you already believe.
Especially that, it's so easy to get caught in those echo chambers online where you're only exposed to the views you already agree with.
Yeah, you're just constantly getting affirmed.
Right, and that's not helpful. We need to make an effort to step outside of those bubbles and engage with different perspectives, even ones that challenge our assumptions.
So it sounds like it really comes down to being more engaged and taking more responsibility for the information we consume.
That's a big part of it. And, we can also support quality journalism more directly.
How do we do that?
Well, subscribe to reputable news organizations, share their work with others, and speak out against attempts to silence or intimidate the press.
So put your money where your mouth is.
Exactly. These are all tangible actions that can help ensure a free and independent press, which is crucial for everyone.
So even though this case raises some serious concerns, it can also be a bit of a wake-up call, a reminder that we all have a role to play in shaping the future of news.
I think that's a really valuable takeaway. Now, we've talked a lot about the potential negative outcomes of this case, but it's important to acknowledge that there could be some positive effects as well.
Okay, let's flip the script then. What are some potential positive changes that could come from this whole situation?
Well, for one, I think this case could lead to news organizations being more careful and precise in their reporting.
So maybe we'll see a renewed focus on fact-checking and making sure things are properly sourced.
Exactly, and maybe more of an emphasis on using clear language that avoids these kinds of potential misinterpretations.
So it could raise the bar for journalistic standards.
I think that's the hope, and it could also spark a broader conversation about the role of the media in our society.
Like, what are the boundaries of free speech?
Mhm.
How do we balance that with protecting individual reputations?
Right, these are all important conversations to have, especially in this environment where there's so much distrust and misinformation flying around.
It's like this case could be a catalyst for some much-needed reflection and dialogue.
I think so. And while this case definitely raises concerns, it also presents an opportunity to address some of the underlying issues that contribute to the current challenges facing both the media and the public.
It's a good reminder that we all have a role to play in shaping the future of news.
Precisely. And as we continue to grapple with these complex issues, here's a question I think is worth pondering. Yeah, is this, a real turning point? Are we going to see more lawsuits, more pressure on the media, or is this just Trump being Trump, a one-off situation.
It's hard to say right now, but I think this case has definitely like opened up a conversation,
For sure.
about how the media works. What are the limits of free speech? How do we make sure that people in power are held accountable?
All really important questions.
And these are things that impact all of us, not just, politicians and journalists.
Absolutely. This isn't just an abstract legal debate. It affects, how we see the world, how we understand what's going on.
Mhm. Okay, so let's kind of like bring it all together. What are the big takeaways from this whole deep dive?
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways is just how complicated this relationship is, between the press and, the law and politics, especially when you're dealing with a figure like Trump. It's a minefield.
Yeah, for sure. And this whole thing with ABC settling, even though it's rare, it, it really highlights like the tough choices these news organizations have to make.
No doubt about it. I mean, they have to think about the legal risks, the potential damage to their reputation,
Yeah.
the financial cost of going to trial. It's a lot to juggle.
And for me, the thing that really sticks out is just how vital a free and independent press is. You know,
It's essential.
for a functioning democracy, we need reliable information to hold our leaders accountable and make informed decisions about our own lives.
Couldn't agree more. That's what's at stake here.
So as we kind of wrap things up here, what are your final thoughts for our listeners? What should they keep in mind as they go about their day, reading the news, talking about current events?
I think the most important thing is to be critical. Don't just accept everything you read or hear at face value. Look for different perspectives. Check your sources. Be aware of your own biases.
So basically be an active participant in the news ecosystem.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask questions, challenge what you hear, demand that those in power and the media that covers them are held accountable.
An informed public is the best defense against misinformation and manipulation.
Well said.
All right, well, that's about all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the whole Trump ABC News situation.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We hope you found it informative and maybe even a little thought-provoking. And as always, stay curious, stay informed, and keep asking those tough questions. We'll see you next time.
See you later.